Well, a reality star from the Real Housewives of DC, Cat Omminney, who claims she did have a fling with Prince Harry, doesn't claim anything, it was true, says she's been whitewashed from history and doesn't recognise the party prince she once knew. Cat joins me now, along with royal correspondent of Vanity Fair, Nicoll, and Fox News contributor Geraldo Rivera. Welcome to you to this stellar panel, I must say.
Hey, Piers.
And thank you, Geraldo, for joining us from across the pond. I'll come to you in a moment. Cat, I want to talk to you because this book that's coming out, Spare, is supposed to be Harry's story. But I suspect we're going to get a very sanitised version of anything which is awkward for him. And it'll just be more of what we've been seeing now for the last year and a half, which is just constant attacks on his family and the media.
Or a total snooze fest.
Right.
I mean, you know, the title, I love the title and think it's a great title. But, you know, how much he's influenced about how he wrote it and what's in it, who knows?
You were 34 when you met a young 21-year-old Harry.
Yeah.
So a bit of a Madonna situation going on there.
Really?
Well, she likes the toy boys, doesn't she?
Well, yeah, I was criticised because I didn't really care about age.
You had a little fling with him.
Yeah.
It was well documented and we got pictures of you there. What was he like then, as a young guy?
Just really, really, really funny, a total gentleman, totally down to earth, normal.
Did he carry any of this enormous baggage which he now appears to have all the time? Because he seems just completely miserable.
He did at the time. Well, he seems miserable
I mean, now he just seems completely miserable all the time. This freedom he saw doesn't seem to make him remotely happy.
I mean, what I saw with him at the time, he was desperately searching for freedom and privacy. And yet what he's done is completely turned the whole situation full circle.
Right.
And now he's got no privacy and no freedom.
Well, they invade their own privacy every 10 minutes. That's the sort of irony of this position. I mean, Katie, we've talked a lot about this. And the reason we keep talking about it is because on Thursday there'll be another dump of 3 more episodes in this Netflix snooze fest, which a lot of it is very boring.
You stay awake for it.
Well, yeah, it is boring, actually. It's very self-indulgent, very narcissistic. But in the middle of all this, there will be more barbs, we know, at the royal family and at the media.
You know,
and they'll play the oppressed victims.
Well, it's really interesting hearing Kat say that, actually, because I think when you look at those pictures of Harry partying, and I started my career as a royal correspondent because I ended up at a party with Prince Harry and, you know, drinking a bottle of vodka and having a great time, and he seemed like a very fun guy. But it's interesting hearing you say that he seemed like someone that sort of wanted to hide away from the media, who wanted to have his private life. And I think that is a massive contradiction in all of this. But as I unpick his complaints and this resentment, and it's bitterness. At the heart of this is bitterness about the institution, bitterness about how he's portrayed in the media. And I think now that he's actually named William in this latest trailer, and I think clearly William and Kate and the Sussex's relationship with William and Kate is going to come under scrutiny. I think there's a lot of sibling rivalry at the heart of all this. I think Harry, and the fact that his book is called Spare, has resented being the spare for a long time. And I think we're going to hear much more on that particular
I agree with you. Geraldo, across the pond, it seems to me a lot of Americans are as fed up with them as we are. I think you're still hanging in there as being not necessarily a fulsome supporter, but a more tolerant observer of all this. What do you make of it all?
Well, first of all, I want to say I thought of you, Piers, when Harry Kane missed that shot. I felt very bad for you and for England.
Thank you.
You know, in terms of the Netflix documentary and Harry and Meghan, you know, and their participation and, you know, their ongoing soap opera, I really do feel for them. And I think that the vitriol being heaped on them, the scorn is so snobby and snotty. It's having absolutely the opposite effect. I believe that they are generating some sympathy now, not because of what they're doing on the Netflix show, as much as reaction to the British tabloids and this incessant, constant, you know, criticism. There is no doubt in my mind that they are telling the basic truth. Maybe there's a shot here that should not have been used, a stock footage of photographers and so forth. But I think the general truth emerges. They seem sincere. They seem beleaguered. They seem,
Geraldo,
in many ways,
I cannot believe what I'm hearing.
Deeply
I've got to be honest with you. You are one of the people I most respect in American television news. You're a hard-bitten journalist. You're a war correspondent. And you've fallen for this guff with these two. Hook, line and sinker. Because they're the least sincere people I think I've ever met in my life.
She in particular,
she's an actress. She's playing a role.
She's a good actress.
My
yeah.
brother, I told you, Piers, I told you how I followed Prince Harry into Helmand Province in Afghanistan, and how the American Marines there and the British personnel that were still there after he had left all considered his service there to be honorable, even heroic.
No question.
So I come, as a war correspondent, I come with that bias. Here's a guy who served his country honorably, put his own life on the line. He married a woman who, for the first time in British royal history, was of mixed race. So the issue of racism, and here Harry's girl straight out of Compton and all that kind of baloney, they have been assailed. I feel for them because they have been targeted in a way that I feel is very, very unfair.
Yeah, but you see,
I
would argue. But I would argue they haven't been targeted in the way that I think a lot of Americans have been led to believe they were targeted. There was no racism towards them in the mainstream media in this country. There wasn't. The papers here were euphoric about this couple.
The Daily Mail just did 20 pages on the Netflix documentary. 20 pages.
Yeah, but that's because. Yeah, but that's because.
This is obsessive.
Yeah, but Geraldo, that's because
this is a colonoscopy.
These two sought freedom and privacy in America, and all they've done since they got there is cash in on their royal titles afforded to them by an institution they despise and are trying to ruin, and they're making hundreds of millions of dollars, constantly trashing their families. You talk about Iraq, Geraldo, and Afghanistan. My brother served in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? And in fact, my brother-in-law taught William and Harry at Sandhurst Military Academy. So I absolutely respect his military service. But if my brother, notwithstanding his heroic war record in Iraq and Afghanistan, went on national television every 10 minutes, dumping all over my family, that would be a very short conversation next time I saw him. You just don't do that kind of thing to families, do you?
Well, you know, where is the kindness? Where is the
their
sensitivity?
kindness?
When here you have a young couple trying to find their way, and extraordinary situations with scrutiny that is so absolutely intrusive, they don't have a moment to breathe. Now he is the spare. He is the one that was designated to take over when I understand all that, and I understand the frustration of that. I mean, theoretically, but I really do believe that your lack of kindness to them is laid bare, Piers. You can't have such a visceral viciousness toward them.
Here's the irony. Yeah, but Geraldo, here's the irony.
They're just trying to pave their way in the world.
Here's the irony. My response to them is driven by their serial unkindness and viciousness to the royal family, and their deliberate attempts now to not only attack their family, who is a beloved family in this country, but to actually destabilise and potentially bring down the British monarchy. And as a monarchist who loves the royal family and the institution,
I think
it's their unkindness.
They're not going to bring down the British monarchy.
Well, it might, actually.
They're not going to bring down the British monarchy.
It might.
They will not. Why? What mechanism will destroy
because they're
this centuries-old institution?
Because their constant framing of the royal family as a bunch of nasty, callous racists is beginning to hit home in America. It's hitting home in the Commonwealth. People are believing this. They're not producing any actual evidence to support the racism claims, all the other mental health
when you
claims.
Have the headline literally read, "Harry's new girl, almost straight out of Compton."
Right.
Come on, Piers. Compton, for your viewers not familiar with this area of Los Angeles, is like Harlem in New York. There's a lot of nice places in Compton, but generally it's regarded as a home of rap and
Compton is also the place.
Urban problems.
I thought that was an unfortunate headline, but the piece that accompanied it was euphorically praiseworthy. And the truth is, she comes from an area about 5-6 miles from Compton, and Compton produced, as far as the British audience is concerned, produced Serena and Venus Williams. So they wouldn't see it in a particularly negative way. They think, oh, that's the place the Williams sisters come from.
All right, even speaking of Serena and Venus, you put it in a racial context. Here she is, a mixed-race actress, who has no familiarity. She wasn't debriefed by Sarah Ferguson, as far as I know, or by really anybody who could guide her into the intricacies
what about her own
of
husband?
The etiquette and so forth. She was hung out. Well, I think
can't
Harry
advise
can do
her.
what Harry can do, but he's a guy. It's not like she didn't have someone say, "Here's how you curtsy." She didn't have someone to say, and by every account, they loved Queen Elizabeth.
No, hang on.
They loved and
She
they honored the
Geraldo,
sovereign.
you're believing the bullshit. She literally got given a massive dossier explaining all these things. It's now been revealed. Most of what they say in this Netflix thing is completely untrue.
She had the Queen's Lady in Waiting.
Yeah, if you can't
She had
have...
the, she
Oh,
had
hang
the
on,
Queen's
well,
Lady.
it seems
Well, she had
to
the
me
Queen's
that-
Let's
Lady.
go back to Geraldo. Hang on. Geraldo, just finish that point. I think you're
It seems
falling
to
for
me that
this
you have a
act.
chip on your shoulder toward them, Piers. It seems to me that you have an anger inside you that I don't know what the source of it is.
Please.
But I think that, for example, to allege without proof that this couple is imperiling the British monarchy is a grotesque overstatement
I don't think
of
it
their
is.
historic significance.
Yeah, I don't.
Because of what? Because of what?
Because of the-
and,
well,
and do you deny that race
specifically-
played any role?
Yeah, but
do you
Geraldo,
deny that race
specifically-
played any role in the way that they were treated?
Specifically, the allegations of racism against the royal family, for which they produced zero evidence. All they've done is smear the entire family, and that is
it not a
beginning to
fact?
damage them
Is it not a
lot.
fact that? Well, I think that this was a great lesson for not just the British people and the Commonwealth, but here in the United States, a great lesson in the need for sensitivity, in the need to have when you have a progressive step like this, that for the country to embrace them. I think that Harry would like nothing better than to go and to help. I heard you were talking with the labor leaders earlier about the unrest and the economic difficulties.
Yeah.
I'm positive Harry and Meghan would like to be part of the effort.
Geraldo,
just
do
as
me
the
a
great
favour. They're
Queen
living in a
did,
Californian
to soothe
mansion.
People.
They've got no interest in helping in the cost of living crisis over here. You've drunk the Sussex Kool-Aid.
I think that if you gave them if the reception had been a bit more understanding, if you had
We
given them a
couldn't have
little
been
bit
more
more
positive to them.
of a fair shake.
We couldn't have been more
You can't
positive
have
to them.
every tap. How do you feel? You and I have had our own adventures over our long public lives. How would you feel if every day you woke up, every single tabloid in the country was tearing you apart or was scrutinizing
Yeah, but Geraldo,
you in a way
they weren't.
that was
They
almost
weren't.
surgical
Actually,
in its detail?
the coverage was incredibly positive. I remember it well.
Yeah, until it wasn't, Piers. The narrative did change.
All right, well,
But
look,
it-
look,
but it-
Geraldo, I mean to say to
the
Geraldo,
narrative- the
let me just say
narrative
goodbye to
changed.
Geraldo. Geraldo, you've been brilliant, as always, as a guest. I love the way you speak your mind.
Oh,
I
Piers,
love
you're
the way
great.
you never compromise when you have a belief about something. I appreciate you joining the show. Thank you very much. All right, let's get a reaction to this.
I just want to make the
A lot
point
of
that the
Americans,
narrative-
by the way, will agree with Geraldo.
They do. But the narrative did change. But it didn't just change because newspaper editors sat there saying, right, now let's put the knife into
No.
her. It changed because their behaviour changed
Yes,
for the
they
worse.
became a bunch of rank hypocrites.
They became very hypocritical.
Preaching about the environment, using
Absolutely.
private jets, preaching
Absolutely.
about poverty, throwing $500,000
And
baby showers.
and by the way, they've made some pretty damaging allegations in this if the trailer's anything to go by. I mean, the idea that, you know, the palace were briefing against them. Well, I know from my experience covering this beat for a long time that their press aides were doing everything they could to keep those negative stories out. You know, they were. So there's potentially quite damaging allegations in all of this. And you know, Geraldo mentioned proof. Well, are we going to see any proof? Are we going to see any
No, we're
evidence
not.
from them
We're
over
not.
the next 3
We're
months?
not. Kat, what are your thoughts now? I mean, if you bumped into Harry, what would you say to him?
I just don't know whether I actually even recognise him anymore. I mean,
Has he changed so much?
I mean, personality-wise, because when I watched him, like, with the show, I just thought, wow, it's almost like... And my mother will really hate me for saying this, but it's almost like she's got, like, a spell over him. And that's why I don't recognise him, because he used to be so, like, down-to-earth and normal, and there's so little of him I actually recognised.
You know, Joanna Lumley has come out with an interview with The Times in which she says that she's horrified by the... She talks about women specifically, but I think it can extend to men as well, that you can become too much of a victim. You start to celebrate victimhood. You lose the strength. And she believes that this generation is losing the strength of previous generations. She was talking about women, but I think it applies to men as well, that there's almost a celebration of playing a victim.
Right, but I mean, he would never in a million years have, back in those days, have ever been that person to do the show.
No, I mean, looking at the front pages
Ever.
we've got up here, this is the coverage of when they got engaged. It couldn't have been more euphoric. Same for the wedding. They had 18 months of great press coverage. They got a lot of attention because they're the biggest stars in the country when you marry into the royal family. Anyway, we'll leave it there. There are lots of different views. We'll have all these views on Piers Morgan Uncensored. That's the whole point of the show, is that we will invite people to have different views to mine and to challenge mine. That's great. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. Thank you both very much indeed for coming in. Still ahead.